Yeah, okay.
Sam Rollins. Mark.
313, take one.
Confirm.
You have tried before to do something about the fact that you believe the society at the moment is not as democratically elected as it could be. Most of these militants are national members,
Yes.
not branch members.
Yes.
What have you tried to do about that? Thinking of your motion to change the structure of the council that you're telling me about, to get more branch members and so on.
Yes, well, we did 3 years ago, when I wrote to every branch secretary in the country, I proposed that we double the number of branch representatives on the council. Each branch can elect one representative to sit on the council. This was only reasonable because we have 2 paid staff in each region to represent to liaise with the branches, to look after the education side and that sort of thing, but only 1 voluntary member in a whole region. By doubling the number of branch representatives, we would have had a greater say, the branches would have had a greater say in the government of the society, which we feel is only reasonable because we're the people who do the work.
And how would that have changed the nature of the society?
It needn't have changed it at all, because it's up to each branch to elect a representative.
But would it have given the branches a greater say?
It would have given the branches a greater say, but not necessarily sticking to the same old routine as these other people say. Some of them may have voted for the more progressive members.
But in fact, it would have, on the whole, have made it more traditionalist.
Yes, yes, probably it would. But it would have given us, who do the work and know what the grassroots work involves, a greater say in the government of the society.
And what happened?
What happened was that although I got 196 of the 206 branches supporting the resolution, and at the AGM following I got a majority, the then chairman of the council wouldn't accept it as a resolution and said it was a recommendation, and took it to council, who wouldn't accept it, and set up a working party. The working party discussed it, came back to council and said, yes, accept this. The council would not accept it. Twice the working party came back with the same answer, and each time it was rejected. And then we were going to have a postal ballot. Then came the next AGM and election, and the whole thing fell through.
So how do you think the society has lost out by not accepting your motion?
Well, I think it only means that the branches are just back where they were before, being represented by one poor person who has to travel all over an enormously wide area. I mean, our region stretches from Southampton to Hastings.
Why would this move have helped you, do you think, to stop the infiltration into the society by outside groups?
I think so. I think it could have done. Just by having a council that was aware of what was going on far more than they do at present.
Let me ask you that again, as you took you slightly by surprise.
Yes.
What could you have achieved by this move?
Well, we would have had a council composed of more people who were involved in the day-to-day work of the society, and with a greater understanding of the needs of the down-to-earth work of the society. We would have still had the experts at headquarters to advise on the major work, of course, but our people at the grassroots would have been more represented and been given a greater understanding of things.
Would the proposal have helped the society keep out the infiltrators, as you might call them?
It's possible. Yes, it is possible, because they, with a greater branch representation on the council, of course, we would have been able to, well, shall I say keep them under control? No, that sounds awful, but you know what I mean. Let's
just go back to where we were before, There is a well-orchestrated campaign to take the society over.
Yes.
What can be done about it?
That's a very, very difficult question indeed. All we can do is to keep the ordinary members through the branches aware of what it would mean if we were taken over.
How are you going to do that?
Well, through the branches again. Every branch has an AGM to which its own members come.
You seem fairly confident that the branches would agree.
Well, so far they have, except very few who, I mean, we're all voluntary workers, and some branches are run by people who haven't got the time to concentrate on it, as for instance I have, and they may not quite realise the seriousness of it, and it's up to the rest of us to keep them informed. That's the only way it can be done, as I've already done so once.
Do you think they would listen?
I think they would.
Do you think most branch secretaries are prepared to listen to you?
I think so. It would appear so, judging by the voting for the council that this year too.
If you have, as you say, won one victory over the radicals, why can't you use the same tactics again?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand.
You won one victory over the radicals in the last council elections.
Yes.
How did you do that?
Well, I wasn't involved in this, but so many others have taken up the idea of doing the same as the radicals, in fact, campaigning for certain people to be voted on the council. They do it, so why shouldn't we? Now, a number of people have taken this up, and they, in fact, circulate branches. I'm not involved in it anymore.
You weren't involved in circulating branches?
No, not this time.
But you were at one stage?
I was the first.
Can you just explain to me how you got the idea and how you went about it?
Well, there came into my possession, I can't even remember how, the Bulletin of Coordinating Animal Welfare, which I took to be a very good idea at first. Why shouldn't we all work together?
But you, just to cut a long story short, if I may, you drew up a circular.
Yes.
Which you sent to other branch secretaries.
That's right. Quoting from the CAW Bulletin, in which they were asking for their representatives to be voted on the council.
But this time you're up against a much more well-orchestrated campaign. They have full-time officials working for them. You don't. How can you possibly hope to compete?
Well, one of the things was that we must bring in a rule that full-time employees of other organisations should not serve on our council. How have they got time to do it, for one thing? Our council, they are all voluntary, and it takes up a great deal of time.
Well, exactly. In comparison with them, you are, it might be said bluntly,
amateurs.
A bunch of amateurs.
That's right, that's right. But,
so what can you do?
Well, only by hopefully changing the rules that no employee of another organisation can sit on our council.
That surely is not going to get very far. You have a group of branch secretaries, not all of whom agree with you. The staff aren't helping. What can you possibly hope to do?
Well, the staff can't help. I mean, they have to stand away from this sort of thing. But it is the ordinary members that we can alert to vote the right way, as it were. That's the only way we can do it.
Why are you so confident that the ordinary members are on your side?
Well, of course, there are more and more of the others becoming members because their own organisations are encouraging them to, and that is where the danger lies. So we must all get our own members. Get more members to join who feel the same as we do.
You say the staff have to stand back, but other people might interpret that as apathy if the society is at risk.
I think it's safe to say the majority of the staff are all members of the society. As members of the society, they have a democratic vote, and if they feel that they want to vote on our side rather than the other, well, that's entirely up to them. But they don't start circulating people, you vote for this, that and the other. Oh no, they stand away from it there. But in their capacity as ordinary members of the society, they can vote for who they like.
But how can you hope to compete if the future of the society is at risk and the staff have to stand back and do nothing?
Well, the staff are in a very difficult position, obviously. They are the paid employees of the society and they are appointed by the council.
Well, you say they can't send round circulars, but surely they can make their views known.
Well, if they're asked, I have no doubt that they do make their views known. But certainly officially...
Sorry, we're out of
yes.
film. I'm sorry. There's something wrong with that.
Finish.
Okay, Sarah. 314. Take one.
I'll just go back to where we were when we ran out, if I may. What would happen to the society if those who wish to take it over succeeded in doing so?
Well, the way it was going when they were in the majority, first of all, we would very soon become bankrupt, because if they continued to spend the rate that they were spending then, that is the only inevitable result. Then, of course, we should have to close all our hospitals, homes, welfare centres, etc. And there would be nothing left for us to do. We'd have no more money. Whether how it would affect the branches, I don't know, except, of course, we would have no inspector.
But you'd still have the same skilled staff, the same expertise to do something about vivisection, factory farming and so on?
I doubt very much whether we would, because we couldn't afford to pay them. I imagine that the society would be run in the same way as these other little organisations are. It's a very great pity, and I think I've said this many times, no doubt other people have. Why don't they prove to us in their own organisations that their ways are better? Then we will listen to them and go along with them. If they achieve more than we in their way than we do in ours, then surely that's the way to do it. Not just take us over.
I must come back to this point because you frankly haven't convinced me. How are you going to stop them taking you over?
Only by vigilance in the branches alerting all their members to be extremely careful who they vote for on the council. That's the only way we can do it.
But they can join the branches and take them over.
They only if a branch will accept them. So far, the branches are allowed to accept or deny membership to certain people, anybody. Now, branches, the sole job of a branch is to raise money. First of all, to pay $3,500 to headquarters towards the upkeep of the inspector. Any money we have over, and we have to work like anything to raise the money, we can spend how we wish in a branch. And locally, we have to spend it on helping poor people with their vet's bills and paying for the boarding of animals while they're being rehomed.
But surely you can only run this campaign at a national level. How can you hope to do it at a branch level? Because most of the people who are trying to take you over are national members.
Yes, but
so how can you do it at branch level?
At branch level, we can do our work and make sure that the public or anybody who the ordinary person who joins the society knows the kind of work we do.
But what can you do at national level? Because that is where the battle will be fought.
Well, only by keeping the council on an even keel and not allowing these people to take over the council, as they very nearly did.
But they could do. You nearly lost the last annual general meeting. Surely it could happen again.
How do you mean we lost?
Well, you had a vote of no confidence in the chairman and vice chairman.
Yes, but that was not accepted.
It wasn't accepted, but it very nearly was. And isn't the fact that you're losing the battle at national level and there's nothing you can do about it because the staff are hamstrung, and you say they won't do anything to interfere?
No, I didn't say they won't. I said they can't. It's not their job to interfere with the politics of the society.
But in the face of a massive campaign to take over the society, some people might interpret that as apathy.
Oh, certainly not. It's not the job of the staff to interfere with the politics of the society. Their job is to get on with the the administration of the society.
But they have a vote,
Oh, they have a vote, yes, as private individuals.
and they have a view.
Yes, which some people think they shouldn't air.
But do they?
Very occasionally I've heard one or two of the field staff express their opinions, but certainly not any of the headquarters staff.
But if asked, presumably they'd say.
Oh yes, why not? As private individuals, not as an official. I am the head of this particular department, and I say this. No, as a private individual, as they all are.
What do you think they believe as private individuals?
Well, having been seen what's been going on at first hand when the council did go the other way, I don't think they can have much doubt as to which side they want to vote.
Which side is it?
Well, on our side, obviously, because otherwise they wouldn't be required any longer. Their jobs would go, their departments would fold up.
How could you be so confident of this?
We have, well, only in that brief period when the others were in the majority, the kind of things they were doing wasn't sort of conducive to carrying on in the way that we've been used to, and the way the public is used to our doing. We mustn't forget that we rely solely on the public for support. Now, you have only to read in the papers somebody who has asked somebody in the society to do something, and we've either not been able to, or it may have been that somebody hasn't bothered. We're not all conscientious, obviously, or we may not be aware of what we can do. Now, you've only got to get somebody, a member of the public, being refused help in some way. Now, I'm not going to support the RSPCA anymore. Now, when they see a branch or individual members of society actually doing practical animal welfare work, I know I get them on the telephone saying how wonderful we are and all the rest of it. And those are the people that support us. That's how our money comes in.
But you say that privately the staff are on your side, but the radicals are going to argue just the same thing, aren't they?
I shouldn't think so. In actual fact, I believe that the immediate past president would only speak to one member of staff at headquarters, and he has since become redundant.
Well, how many do you speak to?
Anybody that I need to in any of the departments. I mean, they're there to advise branches just as much as the council.
Yes, but how often do you speak to them?
Whenever I need to, whenever I need their advice. If I've got a problem and I need their advice.
How often is that?
Oh, it may be once a month. It may be not as often as that.
But you're in close touch?
I'm in close touch whenever I need to be, because I know that they are the people who can give me an answer to a problem.
But why are you so confident that privately, if not publicly, the senior staff are on your side?
Well, I think I've already explained that they realise that if they've supported the other side, they would soon be out of a job.
Have they said this to you?
One or two have sort of in passing mentioned it, but I mean, we don't have sort of serious conversations on that. I know better than to embarrass them to that degree.
So do you believe that the society does have a future, that it can stave off any campaign to infiltrate it, which you feel would destroy the society?
Oh yes, of course we can. I mean, we mustn't forget the public and the support that they give us, and if they wouldn't support us if they didn't believe in what we do, believe in what we've done all over the years. After all, we're 158 years old, and we wouldn't have got to the height that we have if the public were not, on the whole, they didn't approve of what we did.
Do you think the RSPCA has a special position of any kind in British life?
Oh yes, it's unknown, well-known society. The public have a very odd idea sometimes, as I only know too well from the telephone calls I get. of what we do and what we can do. But they normally an animal is in trouble or they have a problem with an animal, ring the RSPCA. Whether we can do anything about it or not, they like to be able to ring and ask our advice and get sympathy in very many cases.
Thank you. Let's cut it there. We've got enough for technical shots. I've lost my sense of when these magazines run out. I can usually time it to 30 seconds. Well, let's try starting anyway.
Am I sitting the way you want me to sit?
Fine.
What do you want me to do?
No, just answer my questions.
And look at you.
Yes. Tell me about Eurogroup. What has it done for animals in Europe?
When we heard about Eurogroup, we were very interested. And in fact, now we realize that the creation of Eurogroup marks a date in the history of animal welfare. They are very well organized. I have been to their meetings in Brussels. We must stop because I've
Just tell me what they do. What do Eurogroup do?
No, I want to start it otherwise.
Well, I'll ask you the question again.
Wait a minute. I know we're stopped now, aren't
Okay,
we?
let's just cut for a moment.
No, just let me, because
Let's,
318, take one.
why is Eurogroup important to you?
I think it's a great date in the history of animal welfare, because it's the first time that a group of people have been able to be recognized, non-governmental people, to be recognized by the highest authorities in Europe. And it has enabled animal welfare societies to start a dialogue. These Eurogroup people have
Being able to talk to the politicians?
yes, they've been able to talk to the politicians. I must start it again, and I
Don't worry,
must.
Don't worry,
All right,
just carry on,
okay.
I'll cut it.
We'll cut it later. But why is Eurogroup important to you? What has it been able to do in France, for example?
It has, the great subjects have been discussed. They are, let us say, the battery hens. If Eurogroup had not existed, because they are determined that there should be a date limit, which must be precise, where the battery system will be abolished. If Eurogroup had not been there, the hens would have been forgotten for a long time, because they are so determined they will not take European or governmental directives. They're just aiming for the abolition, and that's what we're aiming for.
Is it important that the English understand about the problems of animals in France, do you think? What are the big problems in
I think
France?
English people are much closer to animals and understand animals much better than we do. But it is a chance for us to have these Eurogroup people and to join the Eurogroup, to learn a lot about them and to find out how we can help them.
I believe you have some ideas in France that we could copy here. For example, tattooing dogs and so on. Can you tell me how that works?
That is one of the only things I think which we do well. For 12 years, the tattooing has been started in France, and there are almost 3 million dogs tattooed. Therefore,
each with their own number?
Their own number. It's a little bit like a plate of your registration plate of your car.
Where are they tattooed?
You can tattoo them either in the ear or in the thigh.
And is every dog in France tattooed?
No, because I think there are about 9 million. But there are rabies in some parts of France, and it is compulsory in the departments where there are rabies, because it would be that you can trace the owner right away in case a dog has run away and perhaps been running in a wood and in contact with a rabid fox.
And one day will every dog in France be tattooed?
That's our hope, because it will help us to control the overpopulation, and it will save so much tragedy and so many destruction of dogs. But what can you do with all the dogs? Some owners have no idea. Their dog has been stolen, taken to the other end of France, thrown out in the street, and you can never trace the owner. Whereas if a tattooed dog is stolen, for instance, for a laboratory, and the laboratory is about to start an experience with the dog and sees it's tattooed, they could be accused of a theft. So the dog is thrown out. And I have personally had a dog half-shaved, and we traced the owner thanks to the number of the tattoo.
So tattooing dogs discourages using them in laboratories when they
It
should not be
certainly
used.
does, because if an owner wants to give away his dog to a laboratory, he has to give it with the justification card he has. If a laboratory takes a dog with a tattoo number without the consent of the owner, it's a theft.
Is there also a neutering and spaying scheme in France?
I'm afraid it's the dream of many people, but they cannot afford it because the spaying in France is much more expensive than it is in England. I have a small society of my own and I've been spaying for 10 years. But what is that? It's a drop in the sea. However, if every society did it, it would really change the fate of innumerable dogs. I think about 1 million dogs are killed every year in France because nobody knows what to do with them.
How does your own society work?
Well, it's a little bit special. I've learned a lot from the RSPCA because I didn't know how to run a home for unwanted animals. And
What have you learned?
Well, they taught me that they taught me many things. That an animal must be happy not only physically with good food, but it has to have a lot of love. It has to have company. It has to see what's going on and not be shut up in a dark shed as many dogs are in other places in France. It must have, what would you say, moral affection. It
Yes.
must have presence. It must have a mind. Its mind must be always occupied. I pity these animals who are chained up for life and never see anything or hear the sound of a voice or never have a kind word.
So what happens at your own animal sanctuary? How does your animal sanctuary work?
Well, we have dogs coming in every day. We have a wonderful girl who will listen to the owner and to find out why the dog is being brought in. She finds out if it's perhaps a vicious dog. It's perhaps only vicious because it's been ill-treated. She will do all she can to make it happy again, to make it trust humans. And if it has a chance of finding a new home, we will do everything we can in favor of that.
Are you able to rehome some of the dogs?
Oh yes, we do rehome them, but they cost us a lot of money because we give them full vaccinations, we tattoo them in the ear or in the thigh, and we neuter. Not one female will leave my home if she's not neutered, a cat or bitch. I wanted to go back for 1 minute on the tattooing. You asked me where one tattooed, whether it was the ear or the thigh. It is much better to tattoo. It would be better to tattoo in both places in case one figure or one letter could not be read. But just think if let's say an Alsatian is hit on a road, if he is only tattooed on the thigh, it's very difficult to lift the thigh of a dog when it's been wounded. You can get bitten, whereas you can always get to an ear and read the number. Then you call the kennel club and you get immediately the address and the telephone number of the owner.
We ran out of film. Sorry.
I
think we got that.
I'm a
So, Robert, please.
Let's roll.
Mark.
319, take one.
Why is Eurogroup important to you?
I think Eurogroup is a date in the history of animal welfare. We were all very interested and we were amazed to see how fast they started their work and how soon they were recognized, the leaders were recognized as non-governmental speakers for the animals. And it was great luck for animal societies because a dialogue at last started on a very serious basis.
Influential people who could speak for animals.
And to speak in an intelligent and practical and also a slightly sentimental way, but also practical.
But who are not part of the government.
Yes, which is very important.
Why?
Well, you need professionals when you want to defend a good cause. And if you're just kind-hearted and you can just say a few kind words, it won't lead you anywhere. But when you know what you're talking about, such as the leaders of your group, anyone will listen to them.
What does your own animal sanctuary do in France?
Well, I have a very small sanctuary in the center of France. But when I was a child, I was always terribly upset by all these unwanted dogs, and I'd hear the people say, I'm going to poison my dog, I'm going to drown my dog, I'm going to hang my dog. In fact, we saw a dog which had been hung or hanged.
Hung?
Hung. A dog which had been hung. And of course that upset my childhood. And I decided that one day when I'd have a little money, I'd start my own home. And I was lucky enough to be able to get about 12 acres of land, of which 5 acres are full of dog runs and cat runs, and a house in the middle, completely in the middle, so that the animals at any time of the day can see the people who take care of them. See, we did that purposely, so that a dog should never feel lonely.
Are you able to rehome some of the dogs?
Yes, but people are more and more difficult. They want thoroughbreds for nothing, and they want puppies, and if a dog is 2 years old, they think it's too old. However, we do have some very, very kind people who come and adopt our animals, and we have letters for the next 10 years of the dog's life.
So some of them you are able to rehome?
Oh, quite a few, quite a few. But even some English people find animals in Spain, they bring them to me. And the most extraordinary story happened not long ago. A very pretty English woman whose husband was stationed in Jeddah found 3 kittens a few weeks before she was due to leave the country. So she wrote in a panicky letter to me saying she couldn't take them all back to England. Would I take them? I answered, I said if she was really in difficulty, I would take them. And I had no answer. And suddenly this lovely woman walked into the office one day with 3 little kittens in a traveling box. And 2 of them have been rehomed and 1 is still with me.
Some of them, presumably, you have to put down?
Well, we have to, but we've learned to do it with the highest respect. Each case is a special case. Each time it brings tears to our eyes, but we think if a dog is not perfectly happy, it's better that it's put to sleep in the most humane way. So we take them for a lovely walk, we give them a good meal, we show them we love them, and then they die happy. They will never die in anxiety.
Do you have to put most of them down?
Oh no, 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 certainly not. Those which have been found in the rabid area, it's much safer because you cannot take a chance and you know what your regulations are in England. But the other ones, we have quite a few people who do come in and, oh no, we don't put them all down.
And cats?
Cats, we have innumerable cats, but most of them are wild cats. I mean, they're not wild, but they've, you know, what do you call them?
Feral.
Feral cats.
Feral.
And some feral cats can never be tamed. However, we do tame a few. But once our cats are spayed, neutered, vaccinated, and some of them tattooed, we let them free because they can roam over the property and do as they like.
Even the feral ones? Even the feral cats?
Some feral cats who've been particularly favourites of some people who are great friends and who, you know, want to pay their food every year, and we do have quite a few of them.
So you're able to rehome some of the cats and dogs?
Oh yes, definitely.
And put the others down in a more humane way than they would die otherwise?
Oh yes, we want to do everything in the most humane possible way and with the greatest respect. You know, it's heart-wrenching to put a dog down or a cat.
Have you had any help from the RSPCA?
The RSPCA has always helped me, whether I've telephoned them on one matter or the other. In fact, they were the ones who told me about neutering and spaying. And I went to Harmsworth Hospital and to the other hospital in London, Putney. I went to Putney and I spoke to the vets, but I know Harmsworth very well. They did help me when they saw I was in great difficulty to finish a building. Their overseas department sent me a donation for which we have always been deeply thankful, and I will never forget it because I have a few lovely runs thanks to them.
How much did they send you?
Oh, should I talk about those things?
Why not?
Well, I don't know whether they'd want me to. Do you think so? Well, they gave me £2,000 a few years ago, and I can tell you the £2,000, we did wonders with that.
What were you able to do?
Listen, I wonder. Now let's stop a minute. I wonder whether I should say that because perhaps some people won't like it.
Well, just tell me what you've been able to do, what they've enabled you to do.
But, I bought several thousand bricks. What do you call it? Are you filming now?
Well, no, we can stop for a
Yes.
moment.
No, we just find the technical
Yes.
words.
Bricks and-
bricks, mortar.
Mortar, bricks and mortar.
Bricks,
Yes.
mortar, and
Yes.
sand.
Yes.
20, let's say 21 or 22 females of people who had no money at all.
Yes.
And we told them it was thanks to the RSPCA.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So you've been able to do the
Oh, between 2000, it turned out to be, it was just as if we'd had £10,000 because we did so much with it.
really?
Yes.
Yes.
But this was several years ago, and it was their overseas fund.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you're leading up to the Eurogroup again, are you, Steve?
What?
Are you going to have another go at the Eurogroup?
Yes,
Yes, yes,
because I
I'm
want to
gonna
talk
go-
about their leaders and what France did, because
It's just every time he gets round to talking to the Eurogroup again, we stop the camera and you start getting nervous again.
yes, but I think it's getting better. But now listen about this. I think we should ask them their opinion whether we should. Because I think one should be no, don't do it now. One has to be very fair with people who've been
Sure.
kind to you.
Sure.
Oh, yes.
So shall we ask them? And would you be kind enough to suppress it if they wanted to be suppressed?
Yes, certainly.
May I trust you both?
We're going to watch them tomorrow anyway.
Right.
Yes. No, but you understand.
Just cut for a moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
But
ask
no.
about Eurogroup.
Yes.
Yes, yes. We'll go back to
Yes.
your.
Let's try
But
your opinion.
did I talk about their qualities, and that's why we joined, and that the French.
We've got
Well-
one that's good enough at the moment, but let's try for a better one.
Let's try again. Let's try again.
So saying the same thing again
Yes.
from the very beginning.
Yes. Yes. What is the importance of Eurogroup to you?
Well, for me, it's a great date in the history of animal welfare. I think it's one remarkable idea that the RSPCA had, and was still more remarkable was to see how fast they moved, and how fast their leaders were recognized as speakers of value. It also enabled animal welfare societies to start a dialogue with on a European level. We have admired their leaders, Mr. Kay and Mr. Seymour House. They're fighters. They have pugnacity. They have tenacity, and they have raised our admiration, really very much. Therefore, we are following them with joy and also with courage, because they make us work, believe me. And furthermore, France is participating financially to Eurogroup, because we are all aware that the RSPCA has made a tremendous effort from that point of view.
What does Eurogroup do for animals in France?
Well, I think it works mostly in Europe, but because their subjects are European, battery hens are in every European country. They are decided that there should come a day where the battery system will be suppressed, completely suppressed. They will not take any European, any governmental directive. They won't accept them. They just want the suppression. And I'm sure if Eurogroup did not exist, the battery hens would have been forgotten. But they are going at it. It will take time, I'm afraid.
Does France make a big contribution to Eurogroup, or is it mostly a British institution?
I think obviously it's Britain which started it, but France has given a very large contribution last year, and this year they'll do it again. I would think it's very important.
What are the other issues that you believe that Eurogroup can tackle, can do something about?
There are many issues. One which is the most interesting for us was when the RSPCA, that means Eurogroup, sent an inspector to Greece. I'd like you to think which country could send a professional such as an RSPCA inspector. No one could offer that. And the European Parliament has decided to study the issue of the transport of horses, which is one of the most tragic ones. And I'm sure they're relying on Eurogroup and on the RSPCA for advice, for information, for help. And we will all be there to do all we can to help them.
But apart from... Sorry, I'll just film again.
Is that bad or not?
Was that 10 minutes?
Good morning, this is roll 20 of Panorama RSPCA. Brian Scholl recording, 50Hz Neopilot, tone at 0 dBm follows.
Press our own governments to this effect.
220, take one.
And also put pressure on our governments that they vote in favour of the draft regulation when it comes before the Council of Ministers. To that end, I wrote to Mrs Thatcher last week. Unfortunately, the two governments which are most likely to succumb to Canadian pressure are our own and the German. The Seal Protection Group for the UK, which as you know consists of I4, Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, etc., are mounting their own campaign as well, and they had a meeting last Thursday on it. In short, therefore, we are now at the last main hurdle before a probable major European animal welfare achievement, but it's still a hurdle, and we've got this hurdle to overcome before we can say it's been won. In this connection yesterday, I was pleased to be able to present the Richard Martin Award at Strasbourg to the two Euro MPs who have been most helpful in assisting the SEAL campaign. That's Stanley Johnson from Wyton, Hampshire, and Mrs. Maiwagen from the Netherlands. Parliament. Dr. Hampson will be making an oral statement to the Parliament on malpractice in the present situation, and that she then faces a 2 hours grilling from Euro MPs thereafter. What is somewhat incredible is that the RSPCA seems to be the only organisation in the whole world with sufficient employed professional expertise to produce a proper welfare technical document for such a hearing. Apparently those that shout a lot about animal experimentation haven't this expertise, and placards or stones through the windows don't compare with sound scientific and environment welfare arguments in this situation. Dr. Hampson is being helped by a closely coordinated team which includes our own Sheila Silcock and David Wilkins, plus Dr. Robert Sharp on behalf of the International Association Against Painful Experiments on Animals. But apparently there's no other welfare organisation either in Germany, the USA, or other groups in our own country that have this expertise. And we're going to face pretty big guns from the pharmaceutical and chemical industries who have unlimited funds at their disposal. I'm writing to branches asking them to seek the support of their Euro MPs in this, and indicating that monies, if the branch wishes, can be donated for this particular purpose. Dr. Hampson's paper is a technical one, but those council members who wish can get a copy from the Animal Experimentation Department. Dr. Hampson has left out on purpose one or two things which she wants to deal with at the oral hearing and not give the pharmaceutical and chemical industries too much notice. Financial support than all the other European countries put together. Our staffing and contribution exceeds £30,000 to Eurogroup without counting the specialist expertise in the time of Dr. Hampson, Mr. Wilkins, etc. The most any other country pays is just over £3,000. Those with poorer welfare societies such as Greece and Luxembourg merely pay £500. I had a good deal to say to them about the small contributions of the others compared with ours, and I was told that the others were trying to pay more each year to eventually equal ours, but that we must have patience for a few years. Nevertheless, and I wouldn't tell the other countries this, even what we pay is a tiny price if, as it seems, we're on the threshold of major animal welfare achievements in Europe. The Swiss, who aren't members of Eurogroup, collared me for a discussion. They attended the Brussels conference as observers. And they're somewhat unique in that they have access to very large financial resources. And they have a proven track record with pictures and video tapes, and they were able to counteract the fair trade pressure on the media. After the first
2-5, take one.
Lots of mailing shots, the finance that subsequent shots brought in was more than paid for their cost. The fair trade has thus dwindled, but the Swiss society intend to keep up these shots for a further 10 years just to make sure it's stamped out emphatically. The Swiss told me that this method they didn't think would work in the UK because of different conditions. But and they pointed out that the German language mailing that went to Switzerland had been used on a sample 200,000 households in Germany, where the response had been minimal. The Swiss representative didn't seem to want to do anything with a Eurogroup arrangement, but solely with us, whom they said was the only other society which had influence and expertise. And the Swiss asked me if the RSPCA would join the Swiss society in an animal welfare campaign on an agreed subject, each of us putting in £100,000 and pooling our resources and expertise.
Whether we can get to the point where we can even have a proven record of litigation and know how to present a case and know how to fight in the courts. I think this is terribly important because a good litigating solicitor will often win a case where another one will lose it because of lack of experience. And I do think this is important.
This point is taken up. I do have discussions with the superintendents in headquarters who are in touch with the local inspectors, and on any occasion when they have any anxiety about the qualifications or competence of a firm or an individual, then they had discussions with myself or Mr. Milligan, and we have, I think, sorted out.
They do get very hidebound, Mr. Chairman. I had a terrible battle to change from one firm of solicitors to another a few years ago, and it was just because they'd been the branches solicitors since the year dot, and nobody saw any reason to change it, which, you know, this does go on.
Thank you, Mrs. McDavid.
Can I just add a point to that? To agree with Mr. Feldhouse, but the other problem that I find with solicitors, particularly when any organisation has been with those solicitors for a length of time, is the solicitors not keeping up with the changes in the law and the new laws.
229 on the end.
And you know, we've had occasions where we've had to tell them what laws have just come in within the last 12 months because they don't keep them.
All right, let's get the unpleasant question out of the way first. Why, during your chairmanship, did the Society plunge from a surplus of £1.5 million to a deficit of 1.2 million?
I don't know that it all happened during my chairmanship. This was part of a trend which became apparent. There are, I think, several reasons. One of them is that we actually undertook more work. We wanted to enlarge the inspectorate. There were one or two major campaigns which were costly. I can remember one on battery hens, for example. And coupled with that, of course, there was the slowing down of the income. And as I think you will already have learned, a lot of our income comes from legacies. And it's very difficult, of course, to predict exactly how they're going to go. We had been having a fairly good time. But according to all the researches we've done, the income from legacies in any 1 year goes back to the...
Start again.
Okay.
Sorry, isn't there a notice on that door? There is. Well, why don't we put a chair outside?
231, take one.
Why did the Society plunge from surplus into deficit during your chairmanship?
Well, firstly, not because of my chairmanship, but there were, of course, a number of reasons. One of the ones was that we actually enlarged the work that we were doing. We wanted to increase the number of inspectors and improve their work for the public and animals. We engaged in several campaigns. One in particular was a very expensive campaign against battery eggs and battery hen production, coupled with inflation, coupled with a reduction in income. Now, I'm sure you will already have discovered how greatly we depend on legacy income, about 70%, I think, in any 1 year. And that, of course, depends on the intentions of people. Several years back, when we did a study of this, we found that there was anything between a gap of 4 to 7 years between the intentions of the testator and the actual receipt of the money. I conclude that there may well have been adverse publicity for the RSPCA at that period, which wasn't noticeable until we got to this particular point.
This would have been at the time of the Sparrow inquiry.
Yes, that's right.
And you feel that that is what may have led the Society into deficit later because of the legacies?
I think it was a factor. I'm not saying it was the whole factor.
Do you think it was a mistake then for the Society to go campaigning?
I think it depends on the type of campaigning. I am all for the society engaging in campaigning of a particular kind.
Which kind?
I believe that it is important to use as far as possible the media rather than pay for, say, advertisements in newspapers, because that is extremely expensive. It eats up money. And I think it is far better if we can get our case over through letters to the newspapers, through television programs, through radio and the like. And I believe that that kind of campaigning and good news about the RSPCA and the work that we do is probably a very good form of campaigning rather than the formal style of, say, advertising.
What about more militant kind of campaigning, taking to the streets, for example? We spoke to a lot of mostly young people on an animal rights demonstration in Bristol who said that they would like to see the RSPCA joining officially in that kind of, in this case, anti-vivisection campaign.
I don't agree with that. It's up to other people what they do. But remember, I'm not now speaking so much as an animal welfare voluntary worker, but as a Member of Parliament. And I am very well aware that Members of Parliament are bombarded, and so is the government, with all kinds of campaigns, demonstrations, petitions at Number 10, demonstrations in Trafalgar Square, marches and the like. And in my view, looking at it more from the inside than the outside, most of that has very little practical effect. What I'm saying won't please the youngsters, but that's my considered judgment.
What about the campaign against seal imports, for example? Do you think the RSPCA should be lobbying Parliament there?
Oh, but indeed they are. You were asking me about a particular style of campaigning. I am all for campaigning, for lobbying, putting one's point of view over. It's just that I don't accept as particularly useful the kind we were talking about just now. Yes, I am all for doing that, and we have done, of course, wearing my RSPCA hat, done this for years and with considerable success.
Have you done it over the seals campaign?
Yes, I have. I've been one of the leading lights, for example, in the early day motions, which have attracted an enormous number of signatures. I have talked both formally in deputations and informally with ministers, who are, of course, my colleagues.
You've spoken to Mr. Walker?
Yes, I have. I mean, he, happily, I think, is probably one of the most sympathetic ministers of agriculture that we have had. I don't mean he does all I want, but he is very much more sympathetic than many.
Some people fear that Mr. Walker's ministry may stop the campaign, which is now getting underway in Europe, to ban seal imports from Canada.
Oh, well, I shall fight that like hell.
Are you already doing so?
Yes, indeed I am. I want to see these imports stopped. We got some way. I was one of a deputation which went to see the then Minister for Trade, Sally Oppenheim. She had responsibility for consumer affairs, and we at least got to the point where the seal imports were labelled so that people knew what they were. That was only a halfway house, but it was preparing the ground.
But what about the more militant kind of campaigning? You see, if the RSPCA doesn't join in that kind of demonstration that we saw the other day in Bristol, isn't it going to lose the support of those young people?
I hope it won't. But because they think we should be doing it, doesn't mean to say it's right. And I have to consider the influence of the RSPCA where it matters, which is within the circles of government, within the circles of the civil service. And I know that they are more likely to be impressed by a well-argued, well-documented case presented by either professionals or voluntary people who know what they are talking about than by any amount of demonstration. And indeed, I fear one thing. Those kinds of demonstrations, especially if they get somewhat violent, can be counterproductive, and you put up the backs of the very people you're trying to influence.
Well, what about the suggestion, for example, that some people are coming forward with of organising a boycott in Britain, asking housewives not to buy products? I'll ask that again. What about the suggestion that some radicals are putting What about the suggestion that some people are putting forward, for example, to boycott seal imports, to boycott seal goods in Britain?
That's fine. I mean, that was one of the reasons why the RSPCA wanted the seal products labelled as to what they were, so that people would be able to know what it was they were contemplating buying and not buy it. And I'm all for women not buying makeup which has been tested on animals. Direct action of that kind I'm all for.
Are you saying, in fact, that the society should lobby but should not spend money on campaigning?
We haven't got a great deal of money to spend on campaigning at the moment, and as always with governments or any other organisation, we have to look to our priorities. And the kind of paid advertising, which is what a lot of people mean by campaigning, is something I don't think we can afford at the present. But I've already indicated to you a number of other ways in which we can make ourselves felt. We have made ourselves felt, and I hope we shall go on doing it.
But can you do that when you've scrapped the campaigning department?
We have to cut our coat according to our cloth. I mean, it wasn't long ago before you were almost lecturing me, if I may say so, on the deficit that we had had.
Sorry, we've
now,
made a film.
Oh, how convenient for you.
432, take one.
Will you then be urging the many housewives who are members of the RSPCA to boycott seal products?
By all means. I mean, I try to do this now, whether as RSPCA official or as a Member of Parliament. I'm very much for this kind of direct action because I think action speaks louder than words, and there is nothing that makes manufacturers and producers change their tune quicker than when they are faced with a change in the market.
So we can now expect an official RSPCA-backed boycott on seal products?
We always have. I think perhaps you seem to be under the misapprehension that we have at some stage blandly accepted this. We never have. We never have.
Some people would argue that it's very short-sighted for the RSPCA not to campaign more actively by advertising, for example, because if done effectively, that kind of publicity generates funds.
You can certainly put a coupon at the bottom and you can recoup some of what you may have spent on money coming in, but not necessarily. And at a time when we are under pressure with money, we do have to decide what is most urgent. It's all very well to ask us to do this, do that, do the other, but the purse strings are limited. And what I'm saying to you is that I believe that we can campaign in other ways which are very effective. That doesn't mean to say I welcome cutting back. I don't.
Can I turn to the history of the society? The question that many people in the RSPCA would like to know the answer to is, why do you continue to support Mr. Hopkins?
I'm sorry, but I'm not prepared to answer that because the case, as far as I'm concerned, is sub judice.
It's not sub judice as far as the courts are concerned.
He is going before an industrial tribunal on a case of unfair dismissal, and I think, therefore, it is inappropriate for me to discuss that now, and I'm not going to.
But it would not be in contempt of court, if I may say so. And surely many of your members would like to know what has gone wrong in the society over the last few years.
Well, they will find out because I'm quite sure that a number of the press, perhaps you yourselves, will be covering any court case. But I'm looking to the spirit of the law, not simply the letter. And you will know as well as I do that the reason why we don't discuss a case in advance is so it doesn't prejudice that case and the person who is involved in it. And that holds good whether it is technically sub judice or whether it's not.
What about the people who are thinking whether they should leave money to the RSPCA? Wouldn't they like to know answers to some of the questions that have been raised about Mr. Hopkins?
Let me put it this way. When there was some problem in the society before, I announced publicly that I was going to change my will in favour of the RSPCA. I did so. I have not the least intention of changing it. The RSPCA remains very firmly in my will. Does that answer the question?
Could I just ask you why so many people believe that you, in effect, covered up the allegations against Mr. Hopkins? That you took no action when those allegations were first drawn to your attention?
I have said that I don't want to discuss the issue of Mr. Hopkins, and that remains my position. All will come out in the Industrial Tribunal hearing. May I make a general point, which is not concerned with Mr. Hopkins specifically, but about certain allegations which came to my attention when I was chairman. And remember, I haven't been chairman for well over 12 months. When they came to my attention, I said this cannot be allowed to go unchecked, unresolved, and it was I personally who placed those allegations in the hands of our auditors, who are a major firm, a firm of international repute, and said, you have carte blanche to investigate. They investigated those general allegations, and I'm not mentioning any people's names, and the result of that, from my point of view, and everybody else who saw the report, was that it gave a clean bill of health. No financial impropriety was discovered.
Why then weren't the ordinary members of the council allowed to see the Binder-Hamlin report until the annual general meeting voted that they should do?
I think you're a little confused on the facts, because it was not the annual general meeting that made this point. But the reason why was that at the time there were certain members of council who it was felt would probably take the allegations and the answers out of context and make for more problems. And it was thought, therefore, that it was better that the written report was not distributed. But the Treasurer at the time, the current chairman, did go right through the allegations that were made against various people, and some, of course, were very vague and not against any particular person in general. And that was gone through at our old finance committee and then reported to the council. So any suggestion that the council was not informed of the contents of that report is not correct.
But the annual general meeting did refuse to accept the Society's accounts until the contents of the Binder-Hamlin report were more fully aired.
Well, in fact, of course, they were dealing with the wrong set of accounts, because it didn't relate to the years in which the allegations were dated.
You say you asked the auditors to look into these
Yes.
allegations, but when Mr. Ryder drew them to your attention, you did nothing.
That is quite untrue. Quite untrue. The allegations came to me actually when I was in Australia, and the letter and the allegations was opened by my secretary. When I returned, I took pretty swift action. And I think the question must be asked of Mr. Ryder, why, when he was asked by the officers of the council to meet them and to discuss the allegations and what evidence he had for them, he refused on several occasions to meet them. And I have that well documented.
So how long was it before you first heard of the allegations, to the period when you asked the auditors to investigate them? Could you give me the dates?
I don't know that I can give them to you precisely, but I returned from a visit to Australia at about the end of September of that year, and
How did you know it's Dr. Tilden then?
Well, there we are.
That was tone for D8, Panorama, RSPCA, Horsham.
You ready?
Hang on, hold on.
All right.
Okay.
377, take one.
Major Langham, we have been through the minutes of both your own committee and the council, and they do indicate quite clearly that the original request for help came from Guyana, where you've spent 30 years of your life.
Yes.
Is that just coincidence?
Purely.
It is a remarkable coincidence.
Well, it was amongst a whole set of other organisations overseas which happened to be looking for help.
When you left Guyana, the local press said that your vast intake of creek water would one day ensure your return.
And lubber.
That's another kind of drink.
No, that's something that you eat.
It does seem that it was the RSPCA that ensured your return.
Not at all. Not at all. No, my sojourn in Guyana, as it is now called, was very short indeed. It was going through an extremely difficult time, and I can assure you, while I was there, most of my time was spent with the local organisation, which was run by George Messervy, who I've known for some years, who is the indefatigable manager of the Orange Walk Clinic, who at 93 years of age is still doing a damn good job in the most appalling circumstances.
But you went back to Guyana, of all places, and the Caribbean. The society paid for it. Weren't a few eyebrows raised?
None at all, to the best of my knowledge.
What good came of your trip?
A great deal, I think. It has re-established the communication link between this society and what had been branches of the RSPCA in the past, which are now independent organisations. Through establishing that communication link, we have been able to provide assistance. We have in fact given an animal ambulance to Guyana, large quantities of veterinary supplies, the same to Trinidad, educational material to Grenada, advice and material, publicity material, educational material to Barbados, and right the way through. And in fact, we had planned that I should visit other countries following my return from there, but apart from a very brief trip to Mallorca, the financial restrictions that have been imposed on the society have prevented us from doing that.
These trips do seem to be to sunny places on the whole, don't they?
Well, I think this follows because the third world happens to be largely a sunny place, and this is where the greatest need occurs. You get these small organisations right across the third world, which, as I said before, are trying to work for animal welfare, for the prevention of cruelty, on less than a shoestring.
Why did you give, through the Overseas Fund, £2,000 to the Princess de Cray?
Why did we give it to her? The advice came to us from our Director of European Liaison that there was an urgent need there. We examined the needs of that particular organisation and we felt that it was well worthwhile.
What were those needs?
Pardon?
What were those needs?
In that case it was mostly financial because they were building shelters and they had organisations which were in poor shape and there was urgent need for financial help.
Why could the Princess not finance it herself?
I don't believe that it's through lack of trying. As far as I'm aware, and on advice, that they do the best they can to raise funds, but not every country, or not every people, has the same attitude towards animal welfare as we do in this country. But we're far more sympathetic in this country than many others that I have visited.
But immediately after you'd given her £2,000, she decided, apparently because she was so grateful, to put £2,000 in herself. Now, doesn't that imply that she could have afforded the original £2,000 as well?
Well, if she was able to match our contribution, I think that's more strength to her arm. I see nothing wrong with that at all.
Are you aware that her animal sanctuary, as it's called, is going to be the target of protests by other animal groups who believe that too many animals are killed there?
I'm not aware of that.
Do you think you should have been aware of that before you gave her the money? Do you think you should have been aware that there are protests about too many animals being killed?
Yes,
in her sanctuary?
I have sufficient confidence in the integrity of my colleagues here, and I'm speaking now in particular about the Director of European Liaison, Mike Seymour-Rouse, that if he had felt that there was any cause for concern, that he would have let me know.
So it was his decision.
This is my first intimation.
It was his decision, not yours?
Not at all. It was not his decision. It was our decision. That is the Overseas Committee, Branch and Overseas Committee's decision on advice which came from me, and in turn on advice given to me both by the Princess de Cray and by Mike Seymour-Rouse. I have no reason whatsoever to believe that there is anything wrong with her organisation or that there has been this criticism, and I'm very concerned to know that you had that type of advice.
But there are a lot of people in England who would have liked that £2,000. There are a lot of people in London who could have used it to help animals.
Yes, this may be so, but then I must make this point very, very clear, that we run appeals for our overseas work. And those people who give money for the overseas appeal, I think we owe it to them to ensure that that money is spent on overseas projects. But it is entirely separate from the Society's general funds.
But it was not separate at the time that you gave the money to the Princess de Cray. At that time, the Overseas Fund was subsidised by central funds.
It was subsidised on a specific move by Roy Crisp, who was then, I believe, chairman of the council or some such position, where he felt that there was a need to bolster up that fund.
You see, to put
but
it
the fund
bluntly,
itself existed long before that.
To put it bluntly, it looks as if you are asking for £2,000 from Joan Watson's branch on the one hand to join the RSPCA and giving £2,000 to the Princess in France on the other.
I don't accept that, quite frankly. You're mixing up two totally different things. What is your problem with the Forest Hill and Sydenham branch and Joan Watson?
They can't afford to pay their quota.
Yes, I know that. The difficulty that we had with the Forest Hill and Sydenham branch was that the impression was gained, and I think with some justification, that they were not prepared to accept the liability of quota payment. They felt that this was something which needed change in the rules, and there was a reluctance to pay it. But that reluctance was also covered by an inability. And I have explained in some detail to Joan Watson, with whom I endeavour to maintain a reasonable rapport, that if their branch is unable to pay quota, it is not going to be hammered. We don't penalise. In my time, we have never ever penalised a branch for inability to pay quota.
You threatened to kick them out of the society, Major
No,
Longman.
we haven't.
Your letters are quite clear on the point that if they couldn't pay the quota, they would have to leave the society. That was the risk they ran.
Can you quote me that letter? I have never written such a letter.
You made it quite clear when you wrote to Joan Watson that the branch might have to be disbanded if they were not willing to pay the quota.
I said that that was a process which was available if they flouted the rules and were not prepared to accept that it was their first liability. That's a different thing altogether.
And you don't call that a threat?
That is not a threat.
Why do you say it is their first liability?
Because it is contained in the rules of the society. And here I have to refer you to the rules, because it's stated very, very clearly in Rule 10.7, each branch shall contribute to headquarters at such rate as the council may from time to time determine towards the cost of the services of inspectors operating in the area covered by that branch.
It doesn't say it's the first priority.
Wait a minute. You must give me an opportunity. You then turn to the bylaws of the same rules, which says the contribution of branches to headquarters towards the cost of the services of inspectors made available in the areas covered by branches shall be a first charge on branch finances.
A first charge?
This is then referred to in rules for branches, the third one, where it says the branch shall contribute to the society annually towards the cost of the services of each inspector stationed in the area of the branch, such sum as may from time to time be fixed by the council, and such contribution shall be a first charge on the funds of the branch. Now, whether that is right or wrong in principle is of no relevance at this point. It is a rule of the society, it is mentioned in the bylaw, and it's a rule for branches. And one of the greatest difficulties I have is that I have a group of 16 regional organisers throughout England and Wales, and they have a responsibility to monitor observance of the rules. So they feel that in so doing, they are obliged to remind the branches from time to time that until such time that the rules are changed, this is their first financial priority. If you go back to the beginning of time, the branches were the fundraising units of the society. They were there to raise the money to enable the society to maintain its inspectorate. That has not changed. But what has changed? What has changed is that the branches have become increasingly involved in practical animal welfare work. And that is a very reasonable thing to do.
But some branches...
by so doing, they find that they use their funds, they haven't got enough to pay quota, and then they come into conflict.
But some branches have said that if they give you the quota that you're demanding, that they won't be able to spend the money on rehoming animals. In other words, that if they give you the money, they'll have to kill animals.
Yeah. It is a catch-22 situation. It can be argued that unless they did the practical animal welfare work, they wouldn't get the financial support which would enable them to pay the quota. You can go round in circles for days on this one, and I have done so because it is an argument which has no end. But the fact of the matter is that if the rules are wrong, if the quota should not be the first priority, then it's up to the governing body to make that decision.
But it doesn't. You're now saying they're the first priority. What it actually says, and the rules you've quoted, are that it is a first charge.
A first charge.
Doesn't that imply it's a first charge if they have the money?
Well, certainly.
Sorry,
certainly.
we're running Phil.
No, certainly.
I mean,
yeah.
I think we're getting into probably.
Yeah. So
378, take one.
Have you investigated, let me put this a different way. Your position as head of the branches does give you a position of considerable responsibility in the society.
Certainly.
And potentially considerable power.
I would not agree that it gives power. It gives responsibility, but not necessarily power.
You do essentially control the framework of communication between headquarters and the branches. Through your paid regional organisers.
Yes, I, 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 I endeavour to maintain the communication link between ourselves and the branches.
There have been suggestions that the regional organisers have influenced elections to the council.
How can they do that?
By advising people how to vote.
Not to the best of my knowledge. The organisers, from the time that I have held this particular job, the organisers have been told from time to time, in writing, and by me, in no uncertain terms, that they must not involve themselves in the election of council members at any time.
But there have been these allegations. Have they been investigated?
Well, where such allegations crop up, well, certainly they would be investigated, but I have not a vestige of proof, not a shred of evidence of any organiser influencing people for the voting for members of the council.
So you are not even aware of the allegations?
Allegations continue all the time. I mean, the allegations, recriminations, aspersions, call it what you like, they never stop. I mean, you will always find people who are prepared to, as I say, throw a little bit of gravel into the works.
You mean there are just too many allegations and rumours like this flying around in the RSPCA for you to investigate all of them?
They never stop.
Why is that?
Human nature, I think.
It does seem to happen more in the RSPCA than elsewhere.
Well, I don't know about elsewhere. I can't speak for elsewhere. I can certainly speak for the RSPCA.
Could you categorically deny that you personally have ever attempted to influence the council elections?
I categorically deny that.
You are quite close, though, to some of the people who are associated with the Cats and Dogs Brigade, as they're called.
What do you mean by close?
You're in close contact, for example, with Mrs. Wigmore, who's often been quoted in the past as being the leader of the Cats and Dogs Brigade.
I would not say that I'm more closely involved with Miss Wigmore than a lot of other people. I mean, I'm in continuous contact with people from all the branches of the society, from every political shade or every animal welfare shade, whatever they may be.
You was in close contact with Joan Watson in Forest Hill, as
yes,
you are with Mrs. Wigmore?
As much as I can be. As much as I can be. I have had correspondence with Joan Watson where it has created areas of misunderstanding.
But you're not regularly on the phone to her, are you, as you are with Mrs. Wigmore?
I'm not regularly on the phone to Mrs. Wigmore.
Well, you seem to be on the night we went to visit her.
Well, that may be so, but was she calling me or was I calling her? I think you'll probably find that she may have been calling me. Because people in branches who are in difficulties almost invariably call me. They call me in the evenings, they call me the weekends. In fact, I look upon this and I accept this as being a 24-hour-a-day job.
You see, she seemed to feel that you were on her side.
Not at all. I have criticised Doris Wigmore from time to time on various aspects of her administration, and she's well aware of this. But if a branch person, a voluntary person, is in trouble, they do tend to come to me for advice and guidance, and I give it to the best of my ability.
You see, some people who've worked with you say that you see militants, vegetarians and animal rights campaigners as undesirable people.
That's absolute rubbish, and I deny it emphatically. It's absolute rubbish. I'm not a vegetarian myself, and quite frankly, I'm not concerned with people who are vegetarians or otherwise. As long as they are working for this society and doing their work properly, that is my sole interest at the present time. It doesn't influence me in any way whatsoever.
Have you ever called people in the society undesirable?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my recollection. Undesirable. Undesirable in what respect?
Undesirable in the sense that they want to take the society in directions that you would not like to see it going.
No, not at all. That is not my area of concern. As I've told you before at the beginning of this talk, I accept the fact that there are different groups who see the way to carry out animal welfare as being in different paths, and they want to take that particular path. It's not for me to say whether it's right or wrong.
How did you react to the move to change the system of election to the council so that all elections are on a regional basis?
I don't believe that that is necessary, quite frankly. I don't subscribe to it. I find it sufficiently difficult, or let us say the council finds it sufficiently difficult, to find sufficient regional representatives as we are, one for each of the 8 regions. We used to have 16 regions. But in any event, I am very much aware of the concern expressed by branches and by regions that they would prefer to have had a majority voice on the governing body of the society, because they felt the branches are what keeps the society going. But if they stop to reflect and to analyse the position, they will see that on the council itself we have, that there are in fact a majority of branch-orientated people or branch-experienced people, not just the regional council representatives.
Why are there so many majors in the RSPCA?
Are there? How many have you counted?
Several. In fact, some people might say many. There are certainly more majors in the RSPCA than in any other similar organisation.
I don't think so. I think if you check your figures, you'll find that you're wrong there. There were, at one time, quite a number of people who had retired from the services and whose administrative and organisational background made them suitable for the type of work which we do in our communication link with the voluntary sector. That is diminishing. At the present time, of my 16 regional organisers, 6 of them, at least, I suppose you would refer to as majorettes. They're ladies. And there are very few of the majors left.
But there were quite a few.
There were at one time.
They were suitable people to
these
run
were,
the RSPCA.
These were people on whom one could depend, people of competence in the fields of initiative, of integrity, of being able to self-start, and to communicate, and that is the most important thing.
These were the kind of people you needed to run the RSPCA?
Not to run the RSPCA, to act as a communication link between headquarters and the council and the voluntary sector.
But these
the
were the right
organisers don't run the RSPCA, nor do I.
These were the right kind of people?
These were very suitable people. But it certainly wasn't restricted to retired persons for the services. We have people from all from a very, very broad spectrum of the community.
It's not what you'd call an old boy network?
Certainly not. I think that term is most objectionable.
Thank you.
Too sharp there. You just have enough.
Sorry. I've got an inbuilt sense of how long is 10 minutes. I didn't look at my watch.